The Galactic Military Academy floated in the darkness of space like a metal city. It was built on station, far from any planet, where young soldiers from dozens of alien species came to train and learn the art of war. For 200 years, the Academy had produced the finest warriors in the known galaxy. It had seen every kind of student, every kind of fighter, every kind of species. But it had never seen a human before Park walked through its doors. Was 22 years old. By human standards, he was ordinary. He stood at average height with a lean body built for speed rather than power. His black hair was cut short in military style, and his dark eyes watched everything with quiet attention. He did not speak much. He did not boast. He simply observed. Among the other cadets, he looked like a child standing among giants. There were the dominant species at the academy. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, with bodies covered in thick blue scales that worked like natural armor. Their arms ended in hands with claws that could cut through metal. Their culture was built entirely on combat and honor. For 6 generations, cadets had held the top positions in every combat ranking. Commander was the highest ranking at the academy. He had won 47 duels in his youth and had never known defeat. When he first saw walking across the main hall, he felt his mandibles click with disgust. "Look at that creature," said to his second-in-command lieutenant. "Small, soft, no claws, no armor. The council has made a terrible mistake allowing humans into this academy." Nodded in agreement. Humans have only been traveling through space for 80 years. They are infants compared to us. What could they possibly know about real combat? Watched disappear into the crowd of larger aliens. Nothing. They know nothing. This human will not last 1 month. What did not know, what he could not possibly understand, was where came from. Had grown up in the mountains of province in Korea. His grandmother had raised him after his parents died in an accident when he was 3 years old. She was a small woman with hands like leather and eyes like stone. Before could read, she taught him the ancient Korean martial art. She made him practice in the snow. She made him hold positions until his legs shook and tears ran down his face. And when he fell, she simply said, "Get up." His grandfather rarely spoke. He was a man who had survived things that left scars on his soul. He had walked across frozen mountains with nothing but willpower to keep him alive. He had seen friends die and enemies become brothers. He never told stories about those times, but sometimes, late at night, would see his grandfather sitting alone, staring at nothing, and he understood that strength was not about muscles or weapons. Strength was about what you could endure. The first 3 weeks at the academy were difficult but not impossible. Attended classes on starship combat, alien biology, and galactic law. He trained in the physical facilities, always alone, always in the early hours when no one else was awake. The other cadets ignored him or laughed at him behind his back. He did not care. He was used to being underestimated. His only friend was a named crystalline designation, 447. There were beings made of living crystal. They were beautiful and fragile, with bodies that sang when the light hit them just right. Designation 447 was young for her kind, nervous and shy. She had come to the academy to prove that her species could be more than just artists and musicians. She wanted to be taken seriously. Called her because the translator made her name sound like the Korean word for crystal. She liked that. No one else had ever given her a nickname before. They would eat together in the corner of the meal hall, 2 outcasts finding comfort in each other's company. Would tell about her home world, where crystal forests grew for thousands of years. Would tell her about Earth, about oceans and mountains and the feeling of rain on skin. They were friends in the truest sense of the word. The trouble began on a Tuesday. Was in class when it happened. Cadet, the nephew of Commander, had been walking through the corridor when accidentally stepped into his path. She apologized immediately, her crystal voice trembling with fear, but did not accept apologies. He was the Academy's reigning dueling champion. He had won 32 official matches and had never lost. His claws were legendary. His cruelty was worse. "You dare block my path," snarled, his blue scales darkening with anger. "You worthless glass creature." Before could respond, struck her with the back of his massive hand. The blow shattered two of her resonance fins, the delicate crystal structures that allowed her species to communicate through sound. She fell to the ground, her body flickering with pain, making sounds like broken bells. Laughed and walked away. Found in the medical bay 2 hours later. She was lying on a treatment bed, her damaged fins wrapped in healing polymer. Her glow was dim, almost gray. When she saw, she tried to smile, but she could not hold back her tears. They fell from her crystal face like tiny diamonds, making soft chiming sounds as they hit the floor. "It is my fault," whispered. "I should have been more careful." Something cold settled in his chest. It was not anger. Anger was hot and loud. This was something different, something quiet, something ancient. "No," said softly, "this is not your fault." He stayed with her until she fell asleep. Then he walked to his quarters and sat in the darkness for a long time, thinking about his grandmother's words, his grandfather's silence, and the long history of Earth that had taught humans how to respond to cruelty. The next morning, entered the assembly hall during the daily gathering. Every cadet and instructor was present. Commander sat in the elevated chair of honor, his nephew standing proudly beside him. Walked to the center of the hall. The room grew quiet. Everyone stared at the small human who had dared to interrupt the morning rituals. "I invoke the right of vindication," said. His voice was calm and clear. It carried to every corner of the massive room. "For the unprovoked assault on Cadet, I challenge to formal duel." For a moment no one moved, no one breathed. Then the hall exploded with noise, laughter, shouts, disbelief. A human challenging the Academy's champion. It was not just foolish, it was suicide. His mandibles spread wide in what passed for a smile. He stepped forward, towering over like a mountain over a stone. "You wish to die, little creature." Looked up at him without fear. "I wish for justice." Commander raised his hand for silence. The hall obeyed instantly. He looked down at the human with something between amusement and contempt. This was perfect. This was exactly what he needed to show the galaxy that humans did not belong among real warriors. "The challenge is accepted," announced, his voice booming through the hall. 3 days hence, full contact, no restrictions, no mercy rule." Bowed his head slightly. "I understand." As he walked out of the hall, he could hear the laughter following him. He could feel the stares burning into his back. Everyone believed he had just signed his own death warrant, but was not thinking about death. He was thinking about his grandmother's hands, his grandfather's eyes, the long, painful history of his species. Earth had spent thousands of years teaching its children one simple lesson, over and over again, written in blood and tears and sacrifice. Get back up. Always get back up. The news of the duel spread across station like fire through dry grass. Within hours, everyone knew. Within a day, betting pools had opened in every corner of the academy. The odds against the human were 47-1. Some bookmakers refused to even take bets on winning. It was not gambling, they said. It was charity. Cadets gathered in groups to discuss the upcoming spectacle. Most of them spoke with excitement, eager to see the arrogant human put in his place. A few spoke with pity, wondering if perhaps someone should stop the fight before it began. But no one spoke of the possibility that might win. That thought never crossed anyone's mind. Professor, who taught advanced combat theory, visited in his quarters on the first night. The old had 4 arms and skin the color of burnt orange. He had been teaching at the academy for 50 years and had seen many young fools throw their lives away for pride. "Cadet Park," said, using the formal address, "I must advise you to withdraw your challenge. There is no shame in recognizing an impossible situation." Was sitting on his bed, wrapping cloth around his hands in slow, careful motions. He did not look up. "With respect, Professor, I will not withdraw." Sighed heavily. Has killed opponents in formal duels before. The do not believe in holding back. He will not stop until you are broken or dead. I understand. Do you truly understand? His voice rose with frustration. You are not built for this kind of combat. Your species is soft, fragile. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. What could you possibly hope to achieve? Finally looked up. His eyes were calm, like still water. I hope to show him what he does not understand about my kind. Stared at the young human for a long moment. There was something in those eyes that made him uncomfortable, something old, something patient. He left without another word, shaking his head. 3 more professors came that night. Then the academy counselor. Then 2 representatives from the human embassy who begged to reconsider for the sake of diplomatic relations. Refused them all with the same quiet politeness. On the second day, instructor came to find him. Was like professor, but she was different. 10 years ago, she had been part of a diplomatic mission to Earth. She had spent 6 months living among humans, studying their culture, watching their sports and competitions. She had seen things that still haunted her dreams. She found in the training room, but he was not practicing combat. He was sitting perfectly still in the center of the empty space, his eyes closed, his breathing so slow it was almost invisible. The heart monitor on the wall showed a rate that should have been impossible for any conscious being. 42 beats per minute. Watched him for 10 minutes before speaking. You know what you are doing, she said finally. It was not a question. Opened his eyes slowly. Instructor. Walked closer, her 4 arms folded across her chest. I have been to your world. I have seen your people fight, not just in wars but in your sports, your competitions. I watched a human male take 17 strikes to the face that would have killed most species. Then he stood up and knocked out his opponent with a single punch. Said nothing, but a small smile touched the corner of his mouth. I watched humans run distances that would destroy the heart of a continued. Not because they had to, not for survival, for fun. They called it a marathon. They did it for entertainment. She paused. Your species is not normal. We are what our planet made us, said simply. Nodded. Earth. I remember reading about it. Extreme temperatures, constant natural disasters, predators everywhere, diseases that evolved to kill you. Your world tried to destroy you for millions of years. Yes. And you survived anyway. Yes. Was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been burning in her mind since she heard about the challenge. You are not preparing to win, are you? Looked at her with those still, calm eyes. No, instructor, I am preparing to survive. The think pain is something to avoid, something that stops you. On Earth, we have a different relationship with pain. He paused. Pain is just information. Suffering is a choice. Felt a chill run through her body. She had heard stories about human endurance, but hearing it spoken so plainly by this young cadet made it suddenly real. What are you going to do in that arena? She asked quietly. Closed his eyes again and returned to his breathing. I am going to show them what 40,000 years of surviving has taught us. Meanwhile, in the training compound, was preparing in a very different way. The compound was filled with the sounds of destruction. Combat dummies made of reinforced metal were being torn apart by claws. Each strike landed with enough force to crush bone, to shatter armor, to end life. His uncle, Commander, watched with approval from the observation platform. The human has refused all attempts to make him withdraw, reported. He will appear in the arena as scheduled. His mandibles clicked with anticipation. Good. I was worried he would run away like the coward his species surely is. Do not play with him, warned. End it quickly and cleanly. 1 strike, 2 at most. Make it a demonstration. Show the galaxy that humans have no place among real warriors. Drove his claws through the chest of another dummy, lifting the heavy metal frame off the ground with one arm. One strike. That is all I will need. The creature is nothing but soft meat. He will break like all soft things break. Nodded with satisfaction. This was perfect. The humans' foolishness had given them an opportunity to prove superiority to the entire galaxy. The duel would be broadcast to billions. Everyone would see the natural order of things confirmed. That night came to visit. Her resonance fins were still wrapped in healing polymer, and her movement was slow and careful. But she had insisted on leaving the medical bay. She had something she needed to say. "You should not do this," she said, her crystal voice soft and sad. "Not for me. I am not worth your life." Was doing stretches on the floor, working through positions his grandmother had taught him decades ago. He stopped and looked at his friend. "Do you know how humans became what we are?" She shook her head, her crystal body chiming softly with the movement. "We were not the strongest creatures on Earth. We were not the fastest. We had no claws, no fangs, no armor. There were animals that could kill us with a single bite, and yet we survived. Do you know why?" Waited, her light flickering with curiosity. "Because we refused to stay down. Every time the universe pushed us, we pushed back. Every time we fell, we got up. We are not special because we are strong. We are special because we do not quit." He stood up and walked to her, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. "You are my friend. You were hurt because of cruelty and pride. If I walk away from that, I become less than what my ancestors built. I become something they would not recognize." His tears fell again, chiming like tiny bells. "I'm scared for you." "I know, but fear is normal. Fear is healthy." He smiled, and for a moment he looked very young. "I am scared too, but I have learned to carry fear with me instead of letting it stop me." On the morning of the third day, woke before dawn. He performed the exercises his grandmother had taught him, moving through forms that had been passed down for generations. He ate a small meal of simple food. He wrapped his hands in clean cloth. Then he stood before the small window of his quarters and watched the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, his home, the planet that had spent millions of years trying to kill his ancestors and had instead created something the galaxy had never seen before. A species that could not be broken. A species that got back up. Today, he would show them what that meant. The Arena of Vindication was the oldest structure on station. It had been built 200 years ago when the Academy was first founded, and it had seen thousands of duels. Blood from dozens of species had stained its floor. Champions had been made here. Legends had been born here. And many, many fighters had died here. Today, the arena was filled beyond its normal capacity. Every seat was taken. Cadets stood in the aisles and crowded against the walls. Instructors who had not attended a duel in decades were present. Representatives from 17 different species had traveled from across the sector just to watch. The Galactic Broadcasting Network had set up cameras throughout the arena. They were streaming the event live to over 40 billion viewers across the known galaxy. It was the most watched duel in Academy history. Everyone wanted to see the human die. Commander sat in the place of honor, his blue scales gleaming under the arena lights. Around him, other commanders and nobles had gathered, eager to witness the moment their species proved its dominance once again. In the medical section, emergency teams were on standby. They had prepared for severe trauma. Several doctors had quietly expressed doubt that they would be able to save the human no matter how quickly they responded. Sat in the front row of the spectator section, her damaged fins still wrapped in white polymer. Her crystal body was dim with worry, and her hands were clasped tightly together. Beside her, instructor watched the empty arena floor with an expression that no one could read. The doors on the east side of the arena opened. Entered to thunderous applause. He was magnificent in the traditional sense of his people. His scales had been polished until they shone like blue mirrors. He wore the ceremonial battle gear of the warrior caste, lightweight armor that covered his vital points while leaving his claws free. Those claws were extended to their full length, 15 centimeters of razor-sharp natural weapons that had ended many lives. He walked to the center of the arena and raised his arms, soaking in the adoration of the crowd. Then the doors on the west side opened. Entered in silence. He wore simple training clothes, gray pants, a white shirt that had been washed so many times it was almost thin. No armor, no weapons, just cloth wraps around his hands and bare feet on the cold arena floor. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some laughed, some shook their heads in disbelief. A few actually felt sorry for him. Walked to the center of the arena and stood before. The size difference was almost comical, towered over him by more than a meter. The shadow completely covered the human. The officiator, an ancient elder whose crystal body had turned dark blue with age, floated to the center of the arena. His voice rang out through the acoustic systems, reaching every corner of the massive space. This is a formal duel under the right of vindication. The combat will continue until one party submits or is incapacitated. There is no time limit. There is no mercy rule. Medical intervention will only occur when one party has clearly lost. The elder paused. Do both parties understand and accept these terms? I understand and accept, said, his mandibles spreading in anticipation. I understand and accept, said calmly. The elder floated backward to the edge of the arena. He raised one crystalline arm. Begin. Moved faster than most eyes could follow. One moment he was standing still. The next, his claws were tearing through his chest. 3 deep gashes opened from shoulder to hip. Blood sprayed across the arena floor. The sound of tearing flesh echoed through the sudden silence of the crowd. Staggered backward, his face twisting with pain. Blood poured down his torso, soaking his white shirt red within seconds. In the stands cried out, her crystal voice sharp with horror. Laughed a harsh clicking sound. Too easy. Is this truly the best your species can offer? He expected the human to fall. He expected surrender. He expected the duel to end right there in the first 5 seconds, with the human broken and bleeding on the ground. Did not fall. He staggered, he bled. His face was pale with shock, but he straightened his spine. He planted his feet, and he stepped forward. The arena went completely silent. Laughter died in his throat. His mandibles clicked with confusion. What are you doing? You are injured. You should be down. Did not answer. He simply raised his hands into a fighting position and waited. Struck again. A powerful blow to his left side that cracked ribs and sent the human spinning. Blood flew from his mouth. He crashed to one knee, gasping for breath. Then he stood up. The crowd began to murmur. This was not normal. This was not how prey behaved. Attacked with increasing fury. Each blow was devastating. Each strike drew blood. He raked his claws across his back, leaving 4 deep wounds. He struck the human's left arm so hard that the bone broke with a sound like snapping wood. He slashed across his face, opening a cut from forehead to cheek. 7 strikes, 8, 9. Kept standing. His left arm hung at a wrong angle, clearly broken. His face was a mask of blood. His body was covered in wounds that would have killed most species from shock alone, but his eyes remained clear. His feet remained planted. He did not fall. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Something was wrong. Something did not make sense. Why? Panted. He was breathing hard now. We're built for explosive power, not endurance. 20 strikes in and he was starting to slow. Why will you not fall? Spat blood onto the arena floor. When he spoke, his voice was rough but steady. My grandmother survived a war that killed millions. She walked through fire and came out the other side. He wiped blood from his eyes with his one working hand. My grandfather crossed frozen mountains with nothing but his will to keep him alive. He watched friends die in his arms and still kept walking. He took a step forward, then another. You think you can break what Earth could not break. You think your claws are worse than starvation, than disease, than the endless cruelty of nature itself. Another step. My ancestors survived ice ages. They survived plagues that killed half the world. They survived wars and famines and disasters that should have ended them 1,000 times over. Backed up, for the first time in his life he felt something he did not recognize. His heart was beating faster. His hands were shaking. Was this fear? Was he feeling fear from a creature that should have been dead 10 times over? "What are you?" whispered. Smiled, his teeth were stained red with blood. "I am human." Then he moved. It was not the powerful, explosive combat that they used. It was something older, something patient. For the past 15 minutes, while absorbing punishment that should have killed him, had been watching, learning, studying every movement, every pattern, every habit of his opponent. Now, injured and bleeding, he became something different. His grandmother had called it flowing water. Do not oppose force directly, redirect it, use your enemy's strength against them. Lunged with a killing strike, was not there. He had slipped to the side just barely, letting the claws pass within centimeters of his face. Then his foot connected with the back of his knee. The stumbled. Before he could recover, his elbow struck a precise point behind his mandible, a nerve cluster that the thought no alien knew about. His right arm went completely limp. The crowd gasped. How did the human know about that weakness? It was a secret they guarded carefully. Did not stop. Another strike to a pressure point on his neck, a kick to the side of his knee that buckled the joint, a palm strike to the base of his skull that sent waves of disorientation through his brain. Crashed to the ground, his body refusing to obey his commands. He could not feel his right arm. His legs would not move properly. His vision was blurring. The arena was absolutely silent. 40 billion viewers across the galaxy held their breath. Stood over his fallen opponent, swaying on his feet. He had lost too much blood. His vision was darkening at the edges. Every breath sent fire through his broken ribs. But he was still standing. And was down. The silence in the arena was complete. It was the kind of silence that happens when reality breaks in front of your eyes, when something you believed was impossible suddenly becomes real. Lay on the ground, his massive body twitching as he tried to force his paralyzed limbs to move. His right arm was completely dead. His legs responded only with weak trembles. The nerve strikes the human had delivered were precise, surgical. Even his vision was blurring at the edges. Above him stood the creature he had dismissed as prey, the creature he had cut open, broken, and bled. Park swayed on his feet like a tree in a storm, held upright by nothing but willpower. Blood dripped from his countless wounds, forming a dark pool around his bare feet. His left arm hung useless at his side. His face was a mask of red. But his eyes were clear, and he was still standing. In the stands, Commander had risen from his seat without realizing it. His claws were gripping the railing so hard that the metal was bending. This was wrong. This was impossible. A human had defeated his nephew. A soft, clawless, armorless human had brought down the Academy's champion. Was crying openly, her crystal tears falling like rain and chiming against the floor. Beside her, Instructor was completely still, her 4 arms pressed against her chest in a gesture that among them meant witnessing something sacred. Across the galaxy, 40 billion viewers watched in stunned silence. No one spoke. No one moved. History was being written in blood and stubbornness on a cold arena floor. The officiator, the ancient elder, floated forward slowly. The duel is not yet concluded. Cadet has not submitted. Cadet Park, you may finish the combat. Everyone knew what that meant. In tradition, a downed opponent who did not submit was to be killed. It was the way things had always been done. It was what himself had done 3 times before. looked down at his defeated enemy, was trying to speak, but only wet sounds came from his mandibles. His eyes were wide with an emotion he had never felt before in his life. Pure, absolute terror, not fear of death, fear of the creature standing above him, who had absorbed punishment that should have killed him a dozen times and still kept coming. "Yield," said. His voice was rough, barely above a whisper, but it carried through the silent arena. His mandibles clicked weakly. Pride warred with terror in his eyes. No had ever yielded to a lesser species. It was unthinkable, shameful beyond measure. But no had ever faced something like this. His voice cracked. "I yield." A gasp ran through the crowd. The great champion of the academy had surrendered to a human. The shame of it would follow him for the rest of his life. The officiator raised his arm. "Cadet has yielded. The duel is." "Wait." His voice cut through the announcement. Everyone froze. Even the officiator stopped moving. Instead of stepping back in victory, did something that no one expected. Something that would be discussed and debated across the galaxy for years to come. He knelt down. Carefully, painfully, using his one working arm, he lowered himself to the arena floor beside his defeated opponent. His blood mixed with the small puddles already staining the ground. What are you doing?" whispered, confusion replacing the terror in his eyes. Examined the nerve cluster he had struck behind his mandible. With gentle pressure from his fingers, he released the paralysis. His arm jerked as feeling rushed back into it. "The nerve strike is temporary," explained quietly, "but it can cause lasting damage if left too long. I needed to release it." He moved to his neck, releasing another pressure point, then the one affecting his legs. Slowly, control returned to his body. He could move again. He could feel again. The human who had every right to leave him paralyzed on the floor was healing him instead. "I do not understand," said, his voice shaking. "You could have killed me at the end. I was helpless. Why did you not take my life?" Sat back, his body finally reaching its limit. He could feel himself fatting. The blood loss was too severe, but he needed to say this, needed the galaxy to hear. "On Earth," he said, and his voice somehow carried to every corner of the arena, to every camera, to every viewer across the stars. "We have many definitions of strength." He paused to breathe, even breathing hurt now. "There is the strength to endure, the strength to take pain and keep going. My people learned this lesson from millions of years of surviving a world that tried to kill us every day." Another breath, his vision was narrowing. "There is the strength to fight, to strike back against those who hurt us. We learned this too, sometimes too well. Our history is written in wars and violence." Was crying so hard her whole body was flickering with light. Instructor had tears running down her face. "There is the strength to win, to overcome your enemies, to prove that you cannot be defeated." Looked directly at, and in that moment saw something in those human eyes that he would never forget. Not anger, not hatred, something else entirely. "But the greatest strength," continued, "the one that took us the longest to learn, the one we had to pay the most blood to understand, is the strength to stop." He placed his working hand on shoulder. The flinched, but did not pull away. "You broke my body, that is true, but if I killed you when you could not fight back, I would break something in myself, something that does not heal." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Some broken things cannot be fixed." Medical teams rushed onto the arena floor, finally released from their holding positions. They surrounded, scanners beeping with alarm at his critical condition. "Earth taught us that mercy is not weakness," said as the medics worked around him. His eyes were closing now. He had nothing left. "Mercy is what separates warriors from monsters. It is what makes victory mean something." He slumped sideways, unconscious before he hit the ground. The medical team lifted him onto a stretcher and rushed him toward the emergency bay. For a long moment, no one in the arena moved or spoke. Then Commander pushed through the crowd, his face a mask of complex emotions, fury at his nephew's defeat, confusion at the human's actions, and something else, something he could not name and did not want to examine too closely. He reached, who was still sitting on the ground, staring at the blood where had been. He showed weakness, said loudly for the crowd to hear. He had you defeated and chose not to finish it. That is not strength, that is foolishness. No. The voice came from nearby. Instructor had left her seat and descended to the arena floor. Her 4 arms were held in the gesture of profound respect. He showed us what we have forgotten, said, and her voice carried just as clearly as had. That the purpose of combat is not to destroy, it is to protect, it is to defend, it is to stop cruelty, not to become cruel. She looked at with eyes that held no fear. Your nephew attacked an innocent. He broke her body for the crime of walking too slowly. That is not strength. That is bullying. That is what monsters do. Scales darkened with anger. You dare. The human dared, cut him off. He dared to stand up for someone weaker. He dared to fight when he had no chance of winning. He dared to endure pain that would have killed any of us. She gestured to. And when he won, he dared to show mercy, to teach instead of destroy. The arena was still silent, but now the silence had a different quality. People were thinking, questioning things they had always believed. In the medical bay, emergency alarms were blaring. His heart had stopped twice already. The doctors were fighting to keep him alive. Burst through the doors, her crystal body blazing with light. Save him, she begged. Please, you have to save him. A doctor looked at her with something like shame. We are trying. He has lost too much blood. His injuries are severe. I do not know if. He cannot die, his voice broke. Not after what he just showed us. Not after teaching us what mercy means. Through the observation window, they could see still form on the operating table. The machines around him screamed warnings. His heart had stopped a 3rd time. But the doctors did not give up. Because somehow, after what they had just witnessed, giving up felt like betraying something important, something the human had tried to teach them all. Something about endurance, something about mercy, something about what it truly meant to be strong. 3 weeks passed inside the regeneration pod. The machine worked day and night, rebuilding what had been broken. New tissue grew over torn flesh. Shattered bones fused back together. Blood that had been lost was slowly replaced, cell by cell. The doctors said it was a miracle that survived it all. His heart had stopped 4 times on the operating table. His body had gone into shock multiple times. There were moments when every machine in the room showed nothing but flat lines. But somehow, against all probability, the human kept coming back. Outside the medical bay, the galaxy was changing. The recording of the duel had been watched over 100 billion times. It had been translated into 3,000 languages. It was being studied in military academies on a dozen worlds, not for its combat techniques, but for what happened after the combat ended. How Earth defines mercy became a phrase repeated across the stars. Philosophers wrote papers about it. Religious leaders gave sermons about it. Soldiers who had spent their entire lives believing that strength meant domination began to question everything they knew. There were protests. Some demanded that be stripped of his rank for surrendering to a lesser species. Others, especially younger, watched the recording and saw something they had never seen before. They saw their champion, the strongest of them, brought down not by superior force, but by something else entirely. By endurance, by will, by the refusal to surrender no matter the cost. And then, at the moment of ultimate victory, by mercy. The Galactic Council held an emergency session. Representatives argued for days about what the duel meant for relations. In the end, they passed a resolution recommending that mercy protocols be considered for all formal combat situations. It was not binding, it was not required, but it was a start. When finally woke, he did not know any of this. He opened his eyes slowly, confused by the white ceiling above him. His body felt strange, new. The pain was gone, replaced by a dull emptiness that told him he had been badly hurt and was now healed. Was there? She had barely left the medical bay in 3 weeks. Her resonance fins had healed completely, and her crystal body glowed bright and warm when she saw his eyes open. "You are awake," she said, and her voice chimed with joy and relief. Tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Quickly brought him water and helped him drink. "How long?" he managed to ask. 23 days. He closed his eyes. 23 days. He had lost nearly a month of his life, but he was alive and was safe. "What happened?" he asked, "after I fell?" Was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, and it was the he had ever seen her. "Everything changed," she said. Over the next few days, as recovered his strength, told him everything. About the reaction across the galaxy, about the debates and the discussions, about the young who had started wearing white bands on their arms as a symbol of mercy, about the phrase that now carried his name. "They call it the incident," explained, "but most people just call it the day a human showed us what strength really means." Listened to all of it with a strange expression on his face. Not pride, not satisfaction, something more like sadness. "I did not do it for that," he said quietly. "I did not do it to change anything. I did it because it was right." "I know," said, "that is why it mattered." When was finally released from the medical bay, he found the academy transformed around him. Cadets who had laughed at him before now stepped aside with respect when he walked past. Some bowed. Some simply stared, trying to understand how this ordinary-looking creature had done what he did. But not everyone was welcoming. Was waiting outside the medical bay doors. The look different. His posture was less arrogant, his scales seemed duller, and there was something in his eyes that had not been there before. He stood stiffly when appeared, clearly uncertain how to act. "I have been waiting," said. "I needed to speak with you." Nodded, then speak. Struggled with words. For a warrior, talking about feelings was almost impossible, but he forced himself to try. "I have reflected," he said slowly, "on what you did, what you said. I spoke with our historians about your species, about your history." He paused, his mandibles clicking nervously. "Your people nearly destroyed themselves many times, wars that killed millions, weapons that could end entire worlds. You built things that could kill every living creature on your planet." He shook his head in disbelief. "And yet you are still here. How?" Considered the question. It was the same question his grandfather had asked himself, late at night, staring at nothing. How did we survive ourselves? Because every generation, said, we had to learn the same lesson again, that hurting others hurts ourselves. That vengeance creates cycles that never end. That strength without mercy is just destruction wearing a noble mask. He stepped closer too, and did not back away. We are not more enlightened than other species. We are not better. We just have more scars to remind us. Every terrible thing we did left marks on our souls. And eventually, enough of us learned enough painful lessons that we started to change. And the mercy, asked, that was not strategy, not manipulation. No, his voice was firm. The mercy was because I looked at you on that floor, helpless and afraid, and I saw every enemy my ancestors ever defeated, every person they destroyed because they could, and I remembered how much pain that caused, how much was lost. He put his hand on shoulder, just as he had done in the arena. I could have killed you. The rules allowed it. No one would have blamed me, but I would have known. For the rest of my life, I would have carried the weight of taking a life that did not need to be taken. That weight never goes away, trust me. My species has learned this lesson more times than we can count. Stood very still. Then slowly, he did something no had ever done to a human. He lowered his head in the gesture of acknowledgement between equals. "I was wrong about your kind," he said. "I thought soft meant weak. I thought mercy meant cowardice. I understand now that I was the ignorant one." Commander approached from down the corridor. His face was unreadable, but his steps were slow, deliberate. "The council has made a decision," announced, "about the incident about you." Waited. Was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked everyone present. He lowered his head just as had done. "The acknowledge Park as a warrior of equal standing. The Academy is honored by his presence." Each word seemed to cost him something, but he said them anyway. "Your species has earned its place here, not through the duel but through what happened after." That evening, sat with on the observation deck, watching ships move like fireflies against the endless stars. His body still ached in strange places, phantom pains from wounds that had healed but left memories behind. "Was it worth it?" asked, her crystal voice soft in the darkness. Thought about his grandmother's hands, calloused from work and discipline. His grandfather's eyes, full of things that could never be spoken. The long road his species had walked from caves to stars, paved with blood and sacrifice and, sometimes, grace. "I do not know yet," he said honestly. "Ask me in 100 years." Glowed softly beside him. "Do you think things will really change because of what you did?" "Maybe, maybe not." Watched a ship disappear into the distance. "Change is slow. My people fought the same wars for thousands of years before we started learning. But every time someone chooses mercy over vengeance, it matters. It adds up. Eventually, it becomes something bigger." He smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it reached his eyes. "That is what Earth taught me. Not that we are strong because we can endure. Not that we are strong because we can fight. We are strong because we keep trying to be better. We keep choosing mercy even when everything in us wants revenge. We keep getting back up not just physically but morally, spiritually." Slight brightened. "That is beautiful." "That is human," said simply. Somewhere across the galaxy, in classrooms and training halls and quiet homes, beings of 100 different species were watching the recording of the duel for the first time. They were seeing a small, soft creature refuse to stay down. They were seeing him win against impossible odds. And they were seeing him kneel beside his fallen enemy and choose mercy. Some of them would forget by tomorrow. Some would dismiss it as foolishness. But some, a few, would carry that moment with them forever. They would remember it when they had their own choices to make, their own moments of power over the helpless. And maybe, just maybe, they would choose differently because of what they saw. That was enough. That was what it meant to be human. Not the ability to destroy, but the courage to choose not to.